Varus, Varus, give me back my legions. The anguished cry of Emperor Augustus echoed through the halls of the imperial palace in Rome. His distraught face reflected an unthinkable reality. 3 complete legions, almost 20,000 men, had been annihilated in the forests of Germania. How had such a military disaster been possible? How had the greatest power of the ancient world been defeated by tribes the Romans considered barbarians? In 9 AD, the Roman Empire dominated the known world. Its legions were the most efficient military machine ever created. The 17, 18, and 19, veterans of numerous campaigns, marched proudly through the newly conquered territories of Germania. Each legion had approximately 5,500 men, divided into 10 cohorts, and each cohort into 6 centuries. A total of almost 16,500 legionaries, plus several thousand auxiliaries and noncombatants. The appearance of these legionaries commanded respect. They wore short wool tunics under segmented armor, known as lauricus segmentata, formed by articulated metal plates that offered excellent protection and mobility. Their bronze or iron helmets, the galea, protected the head and cheeks with a characteristic neck guard. They carried curved rectangular shields, the scutum, made of leather-covered wood with metal reinforcements. The offensive weaponry of each legionary consisted mainly of the pilum, a heavy javelin designed to lodge in enemy shields and bend its iron shank, rendering them useless. And the fearsome gladius hispaniensis, a short double-edged sword, perfect for stabbing in close combat. Centurions were distinguished by their helmets with transverse crests and by carrying the vitus, a vine staff symbolizing their authority. Each legion marched behind its eagle, the aquila. The aquila was a sacred silver or gold standard that represented not only the military unit, but Rome itself. Losing the eagle in battle was the worst possible disgrace for a legion. The eagles of the 17, 18, and 19 gleamed under the German summer sun, unaware of the fate that awaited them. In command of these 3 powerful legions was Publius Quintilius Varus, a patrician more accustomed to civil administration than military campaigns. Varus had served as governor in Syria, where his brutality in tax collection was legendary. Now, as governor of Germania, he was trying to apply the same methods. Rapid imposition of Roman laws, Roman-style courts, and above all, heavy taxes on tribes that barely understood the concept. Facing this imperial power stood an exceptional man, Arminius, prince of the Cherusei. Unlike other Germanic leaders, Arminius knew his enemy perfectly. He had served for years as an auxiliary officer in the Roman army, had learned Latin, had studied Roman military tactics, and had even been decorated for his valor and loyalty. Rome had granted him citizenship and equestrian rank. He was, in Roman eyes, the perfect example of a Romanized barbarian. But Arminius was playing a double game. While gaining Varus' trust, he established secret contacts with the leaders of various Germanic tribes: Cherusei, his own people, Marsi, Chatti, Bructeri, Sicambri, and Angraverii, tribes that were traditionally at odds with each other. Arminius managed to unite them under a common cause, expelling the Roman invaders from their lands. The organization of this coalition was an extraordinary achievement. For months, Arminius traveled from tribe to tribe, convinced rival chiefs, mediated in ancient disputes, forged marriage alliances between clans. Above all, he meticulously planned every detail of the ambush that would change history. All this while maintaining a facade of absolute loyalty to Rome and personal friendship with Varus. The Germanic warriors did not form a professional army like the Roman one. Each tribe had its own warrior traditions, its own fighting styles and leadership. Some wore mail coats similar to Roman ones, obtained through trade or as spoils. Others wore only pants and capes, relying on brightly painted wooden shields for protection. Their main weapons were throwing spears lighter than the Roman pilum, Framii, spears with small but very sharp points, war axes, and the dreaded spada, a long sword ideal for cutting from a distance. What they lacked in equipment and discipline, they made up for with perfect knowledge of the terrain. They also had a ferocity in combat that even the Romans respected. Additionally, most Germanic warriors were taller than Mediterranean legionaries and were more accustomed to the humid and cold climate of those forests. These were advantages that Arminius knew exactly how to exploit. By the end of the summer of 9 AD, Varus and his legions were camped near the Weser River, preparing to march to their winter quarters near the Rhine before autumn arrived. Arminius spread rumors about a small rebellion in the north, serious enough to require attention. Arminius, feigning concern for Roman interests, suggested to Varus a shortcut through the Teutoburg forest to quickly suppress the rebellion. "I know that region well," he assured. Varus, trusting his Germanic friend, accepted the advice without hesitation. Some Roman officers were suspicious. Lucius Caedicius expressed reservations about the route change. Suggests a Germanic chief loyal to Rome warned Varus, "Don't trust him. It's a trap." But Varus dismissed these warnings, convinced of Roman superiority. The Roman column that entered the Teutoburg forest was impressive. 3 legions, auxiliary troops, and thousands of noncombatants. Under normal conditions, the Roman army marched in a precise order, but the narrow forest path stretched the column, losing cohesion. The first day of marching through the Teutoburg forest passed without incident. The Romans advanced confidently, although the terrain became increasingly difficult. The forest was dense, with tall trees and damp leaf litter, making passage difficult. During the night, it began to rain. Arminius slipped away, claiming to gather Germanic auxiliaries. In reality, he met with tribal leaders. Thousands of Germanic warriors were hidden in the forest, waiting for the signal to attack. The second day of marching was worse. The rain turned the path into a muddy quagmire. Visibility was minimal. Arminius executed the next phase of his plan. Germanic warriors harassed the flanks with quick attacks, forcing the Romans to close ranks. The path gradually narrowed, with wooded hills on one side and marshy terrain on the other. A natural funnel from which escape was impossible. By evening, the Romans were exhausted but still disciplined, establishing a new camp with better defenses. By dawn of the third day, the trap was ready. Thousands of Germanic warriors had positioned themselves along the path. They prepared hidden palisades, trenches camouflaged with branches, and obstacles to slow the march. Arminius knew where the Romans were vulnerable. The Roman column resumed its march under the persistent rain. Now the path was so narrow that barely 8 men could march abreast. To the right, hills covered with thick forest. To the left, impassable marshy terrain. Ahead and behind, more forest. There was no space to deploy the famous Roman combat formations. They couldn't form the testudo, turtle, with their shields for protection. They couldn't maneuver to gain tactical advantage. They were completely at the mercy of the terrain, exactly as Arminius had planned. The signal was given. Suddenly, as if the forest itself came to life, thousands of Germanic warriors emerged shouting from among the trees. A rain of projectiles fell on the Romans from all directions. Arrows, javelins, stones launched with slings, even branches and logs rolling down from the hills. The impact was devastating. Hundreds of legionaries fell in the first minutes before they could even draw their swords. Panic began to spread through the column. The soldiers of the vanguard could not retreat because they were blocked by their own comrades. Those at the rear could not advance for the same reason. And those in the center were trapped, receiving projectiles without being able to respond effectively. The Germans, following Arminius's plan, concentrated their attacks on Roman officers. The Germanic tactic was simple but effective. Attack from elevated positions, cause as much damage as possible, and retreat before the Romans could organize a counterattack. They did not seek direct confrontations where superior Roman discipline and equipment would give them an advantage. It was a war of attrition. The legionaries tried to form small defensive groups, joining their shields, but the irregular terrain and constant movement made it almost impossible. Their heavy pila, lethal in open field, were difficult to handle in that reduced space. And the gladius, ideal for stabbing in close formations, was less effective than the long Germanic swords. As the day progressed, the situation became desperate. The supply carts, stuck in the mud, were abandoned. The wounded who could not continue marching were left behind, condemned. The Germanic auxiliaries serving in the Roman army, seeing the turn of events, began to desert. Some even joined their compatriots, turning their weapons against the Romans. Varus tried to maintain control. He ordered his centurions to maintain discipline at all costs. The standard-bearers held the insignia of the legions high, trying to get the soldiers to regroup around them. The eagle of each legion, its sacred symbol, was defended with particular ferocity. Losing it would mean eternal dishonor. As night fell on the third day, what remained of the Roman army managed to establish a precarious camp in a small clearing. Casualties were already catastrophic. Thousands of soldiers had died. Many officers, including several legates and tribunes, had fallen. The survivors, exhausted and demoralized, could barely stand. During the night, the Roman War Council made a desperate decision. They would attempt one last effort to break through the Germanic encirclement and escape to the west, toward the Rhine, toward Roman territory. They would abandon the carts, the seriously wounded, everything that could slow them down. It would be a forced march. But Arminius had anticipated even this. During the night, his warriors hastily built palisades in the expected escape direction. They felled trees to block the path. They dug more trenches and covered them with branches. And they reinforced their positions with new warriors arriving from nearby villages, attracted by news of the imminent victory. At dawn on the fourth day, under a rain that did not cease, the Romans began their breakthrough attempt. The strongest marched at the front, forming a wedge with their shields. Behind them, the standards of the legions, symbols of a pride that refused to die, and, closing the formation, the surviving officers, including Varus himself. The attempt was heroic but futile. They had barely advanced a few hundred meters when they encountered the new Germanic defenses. The barbarian warriors, fresh and emboldened by their success, charged against exhausted Romans who were outnumbered. The slaughter was appalling. The Roman formations disintegrated. The fight degenerated into hundreds of individual combats where the superior height and freshness of the Germans gave them an advantage. Varus, seeing all was lost, followed the Roman tradition in the face of inevitable defeat. He asked his shield-bearer to kill him to avoid being captured. When he refused, Varus drew his own sword and fell upon it. Many officers followed his example. The standard-bearers, rather than surrender the sacred eagles, tried to hide or bury them. Some legionaries escaped into the forest in small groups, only to be hunted down in the following days by Germanic parties. Arminius's victory was total and crushing. 3 complete legions had been annihilated. The most conservative estimates speak of at least 15,000 Roman dead. The rest were captured, with very few survivors who managed to reach Roman territory to tell what happened. The 3 legionary eagles, symbol of Rome's power, had fallen into barbarian hands. An unprecedented humiliation for the empire. The treatment that the Germans gave to the prisoners was especially brutal, even by the standards of the time. Many were ritually sacrificed to the Germanic gods, drowned in swamps, or slaughtered on improvised altars. Others were enslaved or kept for ransom. Captured centurions suffered special tortures. Some had their eyes torn out, others had their hands cut off. Revenge for years of Roman abuses. With the corpses, the Germans performed macabre, symbolic acts. They nailed the heads of Roman officers to trees along the path of the massacre. They formed pyramids with skulls. They crucified some bodies, imitating the punishment that the Romans used to apply to rebels. They hung Roman armor and weapons on branches as offerings to their gods. The Teutoburg forest became a spine-chilling memorial to the Roman catastrophe. The tactics employed by Arminius are still studied today in military academies as a perfect example of asymmetric warfare. He did not confront the Romans on their terrain, but lured them to his. He did not attack their strong point, discipline in close formation, but their weak point, vulnerability in rough terrain. He used the climate and geography as allies. He applied psychological warfare through continuous attacks that prevented rest. And, above all, he played on Roman arrogance, their overconfidence, their underestimation of the barbarian enemy. The impact of the defeat was devastating for Rome. When the news reached the capital, panic spread. It was feared that the Germans, emboldened by their victory, would cross the Rhine and invade Gaul or even Italy. Emperor Augustus, already elderly, fell into a deep depression. For months he wandered through his palace shouting, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." He immediately ordered the Rhine frontier reinforced and sent additional legions from other provinces to prevent new attacks. For Arminius, the victory was a momentary success, but also the beginning of his downfall. He tried to use his prestige to permanently unify the Germanic tribes, perhaps dreaming of creating a kind of state that could confront Rome on equal terms. But the old tribal rivalries soon resurfaced. Many Germanic chiefs viewed his growing power with suspicion. Others, like his father-in-law suggests, maintained their loyalty to Rome. The equipment recovered from the Teutoburg disaster became a treasure for the Germanic tribes. Roman swords, shields, helmets, and armor, far superior to their local equivalents, were distributed among the most outstanding warriors. Some pieces, especially the more ornate ones belonging to officers, were kept as trophies or used by tribal chiefs in ceremonies.